Doctors are baffled. Doctors are baffled by things we're seeing now every day of the week. And it's not because people are reporting on them more. It seems to be because they're happening more. It's happening more, but then you got the fact checkers telling you why it's not a big deal that it's happening more, or that it's happening more, but don't come to any conclusions there. Don't do too much of that thinking for yourself. It's not good for you. Might get you deplatformed. This is the latest story. It's going to shock you. High school tennis player. This is out of Indiana. And then you're going to say, where are the journalists? Someone on Twitter referred to me as a journalist. I'm an analyst. I'm an analyst and a talkative individual who likes to get to the bottom of things. Maybe that's what a journalist always meant. It's in diet and fitness, by the way. That's beautiful. I didn't notice that the first 15 times I read this article. The date, it was October 20th. We're the 24th now, so just last week. High school tennis player's teammate and coach save his life after sudden cardiac arrest of a high school teenager. Just these are normal things now. If you think they're abnormal, you're the abnormal one. When Drew Strasser collapsed, his teammate Jake performed CPR and his coach used a defibrillator to help. Their quick action likely saved his life. I won't say likely. When someone's heart stops beating, it's not going to start. And by the way, by the sounds of this article, it wasn't arrhythmia. It wasn't palpitations. It was a sudden heart attack. Drew Strasser, 18, had just finished his warm-up laps at tennis practice when he lurched toward the wall to brace himself before slumping down unconscious. His teammate and friend, Jake, jumped into action performing CPR while a coach, Jesse Atkinson, rushed to get an automated external defibrillator, AED, to jolt his heart. Their quick action likely saved his life. Listen to this. I never would have thought it would be my kid. An 18-year-old kid, says his mother, Linnea Strasser, 38, of Rochester, Indiana today. His friend, his 18-year-old teammate who works as a lifeguard, luckily he handled the situation right. Nobody knows how you're going to react to a situation like that, and he did what he needed to do. And that's the kid in the hospital. Early practice ends in an emergency. Okay, so let's see this. He wakes up early, goes to practice. It wouldn't have been as likely that they could have saved his life without the AED had he not be inside the school in close proximity to it. Ambulance took him to a hospital within an hour. They stabilized him. His parents wondered if Drew Strasser experienced a seizure, so his mom called the principal to try to find out more information. The EMT thought it might have been a heart attack. Once the Strassers got to the hospital, they received a little more information. They told us, no, he didn't have a heart attack. It was that he was in sudden cardiac arrest. Linnea Strasser said, it was very traumatic, scary, scary morning. Sudden cardiac arrest is defined as the abrupt lost, what's up with the typos in this? Abrupt loss of heart function, breathing, and consciousness. Whereas a heart attack is when blood flow to a part of the heart is blocked. So it's even worse. His parents couldn't believe what was happening, yada, yada. Hey, his parents couldn't believe what was happening, but I think a lot of people out there can believe what was happening. The kid's 18 years old. He's from Indiana. He plays tennis. The interesting thing is now when parents are 38 years old to, let's just say 55 years old, sometimes you can pretty much guess that the parent might have more of a social media footprint on certain platforms than the kids. 18 is pretty young. I mean, 18 is pretty young and pretty old. They probably have a social media footprint. There's homework to be done here for anybody who wants to do the homework. The first question I had was, okay, Indiana. Joshy G says, we had a 15-year-old die on the football field like 5 years back in my small town. It's something that happens during times of physical exertion. Absolutely. I recall incidents of it happening as I grew up. Few and far in between. Oftentimes followed by an investigation. Oftentimes followed by a lawsuit if, for example, they were making football players do strenuous workouts on a hot summer's day. Hot, humid summer day, heat stroke. Heat stroke is different than sudden cardiac arrest. This is no medical advice. I'm just reading a chat. Brody Dover. If your heart stops, the AED won't do anything because that'll be a PEA. You need to tell me what a PEA is. AEDs will shock ventricular fibrillation and a few other arrhythmia. What is a PEA in that context? We are live on Rumble as well. So, it used to be that there were journalists who would say, okay, by the way, this story is not about the miracle that is the AED. Funny thing, AED in French is Association des étudiants en droit. I was the president of the AED in French, Law Student Association. AED, the defibrillator. It's the defibrillator. You see them in back. The story here is not the miraculous nature of a defibrillator. It's not the fast thinking of this dude's best friend for whom he will be, indebted and grateful for the rest of his life. It's not. It could be about knowing CPR and knowing first aid so that if anything like this happens, you know what to do. The story of this is it's another 18-year-old kid suffering another heart issue, and people don't seem to be asking the proper questions. The journalists don't seem to be delving into social media footprints that might find explanations. But first question I had, Indiana. Okay. Let me just get the link here. Indiana. What's the immunization schedule of Indiana like? Is it mandatory in schooling for the Rona? So first things first. This appears to be the Indiana required and recommended school immunizations. First question for anybody who's interested. What's the status of the Rona jab in Indiana? Well, if we look here, we can see under the recommended sections, COVID-19, as of kindergarten to 5th grade, is recommended. The COVID-19 is recommended grade 6 to 11. And for grade 12, COVID-19 is recommended. If you look over here, it says COVID-19 vaccine is recommended for all students 5 years of age and older per CDC and FDA's emergency use authorization. Review required after FDA full approval. I'm sure it's going to not become recommended after FDA required. I'm sure it's not going to be required after the CDC just approved to add it to the list of routine the immunization schedule. So Indiana, it's not mandatory for kids, but it's recommended. Another question is this. Can I ask the question? Has this kid been vaccinated? The mother's giving interviews. The mother's making contact. Did anybody think to ask that question? Or is it rude? Is it rude and impolite in the context of a story about an 18-year-old suffering a massive cardiac incident? It's rude to ask that question. And now I say that, and I'm being a bad boy today because I'm having a Red Bull, but I'm also going to have my greens in a second. It's rude. It's rude to ask. It's conspiratorial to ask the question. And it's not like people are reading that article not thinking it. So they're not. It's not that they're giving information that might burst people's bubbles. It might quell theories. They're not asking an obvious question, providing information that they know people reading this story are looking for. And they're doing a disservice to everybody, to the viewers, to the victims, to potential victims. If the answer is no, this kid's intact, okay, well, people are going to have to find other dots to connect. If the answer is no, this kid was not intact, people have to start answering some questions, and people have to start facing some realities, because it's not a question of protecting someone who's already been a potential victim. It's a question of making sure that we can act accordingly, potentially, hypothetically, to prevent this from happening to another person in the future.